Hello to all of you listening. Thank you for your interest in the webinar today. Before I launch right into it, I'll just say a few words about the Think Tank Initiative's webinars in general. This is the fourth webinar that we have put on in about 2 months, and the aim of these bi-weekly webinars is to allow us to easily engage and share with presenters and with each other on a range of topics. We have 3 formats for these webinars in mind, so to date only one particular format has been used. This is the practically driven webinar. One of the other formats that we envision is topic driven, which would provide a space for more spontaneous discussion amongst many different participants. An example of a future webinar like this will be a discussion on what a post-MDG development agenda might look like. The second other format is author or guest speaker driven. For instance, we may ask a member of the Think Tank Initiative's International Advisory Group to come on and discuss a particular subject of interest to them, or we may ask the author of an article or book related to think tanks to do a webinar. But back to the format that we have for today, the practically driven webinar on accessing, sorting, and using your institution's quantitative data that is currently housed in the Think Tank Initiative's online database. I'll be presenting for about 20 minutes. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Katie Stockton, and I am the Program Management Officer for the Think Tank Initiative. Essentially, this means I'm responsible for tasks related to many aspects of the program, including monitoring and evaluation, communications, and general program management. I also have spent a lot of time with our database, and so today we'll be showcasing how you can find, access, and use the quantitative data that is stored about your institution. So as you know, the Think Tank Initiative collects quantitative and qualitative data every year on each institution that we support through various means. For instance, each year institutions are required to submit an annual report, reporting on progress towards their tailored objectives. They're also required to submit a budget showing how the grant money will be spent, as well as a global budget, and are required to submit an annual monitoring questionnaire. So today I'll be talking about the kinds of quantitative data that exist for each institution and how you can access and make sense of it. The 3 types of data that we'll be looking at are the monitoring questionnaire data, the peer review data, and the policy community survey data. So first, let's talk about the questionnaire. The monitoring questionnaire was administered in the first year of your institution's grant. So this means that for African institutions, it was administered in 2008, and 2009 for Latin America and South Asia. Since then, each year an annual monitoring questionnaire is administered. And the annual monitoring questionnaire contains a subset of questions that are in the baseline monitoring questionnaire. So we don't want to ask you a lot of questions every single year because it might become a bit burdensome. So we've taken a subset of those, and in the end of the grant period, in year 4, we'll be asking the full set of questions again. So this is what the monitoring questionnaire looks like, the full thing. You can see it's quite long and asks questions about the organization in general, research quality, and policy linkages. It's about 20 pages. And we can tell which questions are asked every year by whether or not an asterisk is beside them. So you can see that questions 1.1 through 1.8 have no asterisks beside them, but if we go to question 1.9, you see this little asterisk here denotes that this question is asked in the annual monitoring questionnaire. And the annual monitoring questionnaire is one that people may be more familiar with. It's an Excel sheet that looks like this. So there's this preamble tab, there's an instructions tab that tells you how to fill out the questionnaire, and then a number of tabs that relate to various aspects of your organization's overall performance, research quality, and policy linkages, the three pillars of think tank initiative support. The annual monitoring questionnaire has gone through a few changes over the years, and we still by no means claim that it's perfect. It's a tool that we continue to try to improve, while also ensuring the data we collect is comparable from year to year so that we can accurately map changes over time. The second type of quantitative data that we've got is the peer review data. So in the first year of the grant, the think tank initiative asked each institution to provide 4 research outputs within a specific time frame that we had externally peer reviewed by various individuals around the globe. Some institutions sent 4 outputs, while others did not have 4 that they had produced during the time frame that we requested, so they sent as many as they could. This is what the peer review scoring sheet looked like, and this is what was used for all of the outputs that were sent to us. So you'll see below here that each of the reviewers had guidelines that were given for how to score each output. And for the actual scoring sheet, oddly enough, there are 19 questions total, 14 in section A and 5 in section B. So the total maximum score that any one output can receive is 190 points, as each question is scored as 10. You'll see here in section C, we also asked reviewers to submit written comments on what institutions did really well and what could be improved upon in the future. The third type of quantitative data that we have is the policy community survey data. The policy community survey was carried out for the think tank initiative by a company called GlobeScan. They surveyed a number of senior level decision makers, stakeholders within the research community, and media representatives in each country where the think tank is active in Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. The goal of the survey was to scope the views of the various members of the policy-making community about the capacity of think tanks in general and of the think tank initiative grantees in particular to undertake high-quality, policy-relevant research and to influence the policy-making process. And here's just a view of what that survey looked like. So this was not developed by IDRC, but by GlobeScan, as I mentioned. So it may look a bit confusing. The peer review data and the policy community survey data were sent to each institution in a mini fact sheet showing the main results of these exercises. And of course, each institution has access to the annual monitoring questionnaire data because it is provided by the institutions themselves to the think tank initiative program officers every year. Oh, we've just got one person joining. Debbie Prasad, hello.
Oh.
Hi. That's quite all right. That's
Yep.
quite all right. I'll just continue with where I was, and then I can send you the link to the presentation afterwards.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. So picking up where I left off, it's also available, all of this quantitative data is available to you, to your institution through the Think Tank Initiative's online database. So each institution has a separate URL from which you can access your quantitative data and which can be changed at any time. So you may want to change this, for instance, if somebody leaves the organization who should no longer have access to your institution's data. In that case, you could just ask the program officer responsible for your institution or myself to change the URL. And if you don't currently have the URL for your institution, again, you can ask the program officer or me at any time. So now that we're sort of aware of what the different kinds of data, the quantitative data that we have are, let's take a look at what this looks like. Here I've copied out a sample link. So we'll just navigate to this URL. And you'll see here, this is what it will look like for you. This is a test institution. So once you're here, it will say your institution's name here, and then you see you have the options to download the 3 sets of data that we were discussing. The monitoring and evaluation data is the annual monitoring questionnaire. Then we've got the policy community survey data and the peer review data. And you can also see that you have the option to download the data in 2 different formats. So either in CSV Excel format or in Stata. And I would strongly recommend using Stata if you have it. It's a statistical software package that can be used for data management, statistical analysis, graphics, and other tasks. So let's see what would happen if we clicked on the monitoring questionnaire tab for Excel. It takes just a moment to download, asks you whether you want to save or open the file. We'll just say open. So it would pull up something like this. Now, because this is the test institution, there's actually no data in here. So what I've done is created example test data. So this is more like what it would look like for your particular institution. Fairly typical looking data set, but notice there are sort of a lot of numbers where we otherwise might expect to see written answers. For instance, in the country tab here, we would expect to see the name of an actual country and not just one. So let's see what this data set, looks like in Stata. So this is what, if you clicked on the Stata button here, and you have Stata, this is what it would look like. So you can see it's pretty similar looking to the Excel data, but because Stata knows that some of these questions are coded, for instance, in the country tab that we were just discussing, it says India rather than 1, because in our data set, India is coded as 1, likewise with region and with cohort, etc. So there are different colors depending on whether the answer is a number. So all strict numbers are just shown in black, like the total grant amount. A coded question, these are the ones shown in blue, or a qualitative answer. So just pure text is shown in red. The other thing to note here is the order of the variables. So you'll see that whenever you download the annual monitoring questionnaire data, the variables don't appear in the same order as the questionnaire. It starts out looking pretty good, Q11, Q12, etc. But when you sort of skip to the end, sort of we're in Q420, still good. But then after 423, we go into question 110. This is because we've added additional questions over the years, and every time we add questions and hence add variables, they get added to the end of the data set, regardless of where they technically should appear in the questionnaire. But to help us solve this problem, we've created what Stata calls do files that automatically sort the data for us. And I'm happy to provide this to anybody that has Stata because it makes life much, much easier. So we can just say order these variables, it quickly runs the do file, and then you are set. And then if you go back, actually there's 2 do files, we keep adding. So there's 1 and 2, so if we go back and browse the variables, now ends with 423, the last question of the questionnaire, and everything else is in order. So as I say, if you don't have Stata, I'm happy to sort this for you and order it in any way. It doesn't take me very long at all. And from here, I can easily copy and paste the data out into Excel and send that file to you. So let's just go back here. And while we've tried to name the variables in a way that makes sense, it's easiest to know what we're looking at and to make sense of it all by using the variables map, which is here. So, sorry. So using this, you can easily determine which questions in the monitoring questionnaire correspond to which variables in the downloaded data. So up here is where you'll find all of the variables, identifier, monitoring year, etc. And going here, we find monitoring year, name, org. So these are all listed up at the top. And as I've said, we've tried to name them in a way that makes sense, but as you'll recall, the annual monitoring questionnaire is a subset of questions from the full baseline monitoring questionnaire. So if we take a look here at the Organization and Environment tab, we'll see that this is listed as question 1.1 on work mix, but it's actually variable Q19. And this is because this is the first Q19 in the monitoring questionnaire, the full baseline monitoring questionnaire, is the first question that is asked in the annual monitoring questionnaire. So they're all of the variable names are based on the subsets of questions. But like the files that we have for sorting in Stata, we also have a file in Stata that allows us to only keep those variables that are asked every year. So if you don't want to see all of them listed, then we can just get rid of the variables that are not asked every year. So like this variable map for the annual monitoring questionnaire, we also have variable maps for the peer review, which is pretty straightforward. Document name is the title, year the document completed, with the publication year, etc. Now, it's also important to note that due to the space restrictions in Stata, the summary comments that are in each peer review are not contained within the database. So if you are looking for the summary comments, you'll have to ask the program officer responsible, or once again, you can ask me. But as I said, this information was provided to the institutions in the fact sheets after this peer review and policy community survey were completed. And besides the peer review, of course, we've also got the map for the policy community survey. And all of these I'm very happy to provide to anyone who would like them. So sort of once you've figured out what all of these things are, you can do a number of things with the data. For instance, for the annual monitoring questionnaire, perhaps you'd like to see how many total publications your institution has been producing over the last 3 years. So this may include publications like newsletters or bulletins, journal articles, chapters in books or full books, policy briefs, etc. Any kind of publication that your organization has specified. So from the variable map here, we know that we're talking about this particular table, the publications table. So what we would look for is the number published in whatever year we're looking at. So we know that it's Q41, A, B, C, whatever, followed by NUM, number. So then we would go to our data, now that it's sorted, and look for Q41. Here we go. So these are all of the all of the publications that have been produced by your institution, and each row corresponds to 1 year. So this is all 2009, this is 2010, and this is 2011. What I typically do is copy and paste this data into Excel because I find it easier to work in Excel. And so we would paste it into here. This is sort of like a cooking show because I've already done this. Kazam, you find the sum for each of them, and then you come up with a graph. One could argue this is not that meaningful because there's a whole bunch of different kinds of publications, but anyway, you get the idea of what you could do with it. Likewise, for the peer review, you could see perhaps you wanted to know the average number, the average score for each of the particular questions. So this institution received very high scores for most of the questions, actually. There was just sort of this one output that didn't score quite as low. So out of 190, these are quite good scores, but this gives you the average across all of the research outputs that were provided. And for the policy community survey, perhaps you want to see the breakdown of how many stakeholders said that they were familiar with your institution. So we would go to the variable map for the policy community survey and look for the question, how familiar are you with each of the following independent policy research institutions? And know that we're looking for a variable that has C4_IN. Granted these are not intuitively named. I also have a lot of trouble sort of figuring out what's what, but if we go to Stata and open up that particular file, browse this, and so we were looking for C4_IN. It's here. So this is the ID, so we'll just say your institution's name, and this ranks how familiar each stakeholder said they were with a particular institution. So you can take that, copy and paste it into Excel, and come up with a quick graph using the countif function to see how many people said they were familiar with your institution. So not at all familiar, not that familiar, somewhat familiar, and then familiar and very familiar, and come up with this pie chart. Of course, not all people like pie charts, but you get an idea of what you could do with the data. So as I say, it's a lot easier to do the sorting and whatnot in Stata. But from Stata, I find it much easier to copy and paste into Excel to make up any visualizations that I'd like to see, because I'm not familiar with that kind of operation within Stata. And of course, if you don't have Stata, would like me to do any sorting for you, I am more than happy to do that because it doesn't take me any time at all. So I hope you found this useful and will find working with your data useful. And this brings us to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take a question if you've got one, Debbie Prasad.
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
I'm sorry, I came in late. Only one question that I had was, where is the database maintained?
The database is stored on our IDRC servers, and I'm not sure if you came in late to see this, but each institution has a URL that is specific to your institution. So I'll just quickly show you. So you would get a link that looks like this for your institution, and come to this page for your institution.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know you missed the beginning of the presentation, so I will gladly share that with you. Did you have any other questions?
Not really. I mean, quite clear to the Excel, the data in Excel format and also that data